All right, welcome back. Here we are for Chapter 6. Here we go. Chapter 6 ST Outside the Small Craftsman Home in Ravenna, Seattle, Washington. So there we were, a rejected crow with an identity crisis, partnering a bloodhound with the IQ of boiled pudding. We were perhaps the most pathetic excuse for an attempted murder on the face of the earth. Here we were launching ourselves into a world we've never known, one that had new teeth and no edges and a recent and significant overhaul. I led Dennis along the sidewalk, passing dead traffic lights, Nargotha's fairy tale house, and the yard with the now dusty swing set, releasing an involuntary cackle as I realized I was following cultural norms that may not apply anymore. With no cars in sight, we didn't need to look left or right while crossing the road, or halt at stop signs, but I did it anyway because that's how I was raised, and I had to hold on to something other than the leathery loop of Dennis's leash. The gutters choked on trash that blanketed the sidewalks. It had baked and cooled, leaving the air pregnant with saccharine decay. Obviously, the garbage collecting mofos had been at the NyQuil. When Big Jim took NyQuil, he slept through all four of his alarms, and I'd have to wake him by pelting beer bottle caps at his head. Big Jim. The trauma of nearly being eaten by my best friend was the single greatest pain I had ever known. It felt as though a sword had twisted itself through my papery skin. I now had learned the pain of betrayal, a pain that changes your very cells, writing itself into your DNA. All around us, the grass was tall, wicked weeds spiraling and impish, nature's barbed wire. If things were hiding in its chaos, they chose to remain invisible. Every few flaps, my feathers shivered with uncertainty. Dennis seemed keen to be outside again, preoccupied with his nasal adventures, trailing his spongy black whiffer along the ground, pendulous wrinkles swinging from side to side. He had a lot to catch up on. Now and then, I tentatively dropped the leash and soared above to do recon, checking out what lay directly ahead of us, looking for the dark outline of a predator, looking for signs of twisted limbs, hungry vermilion eyes, and neck bones with no rules. Looking for the healthy mofos I knew were out there, and most of all, listening. I reluctantly tuned into Aura, listening to the boastful hoarding stories of a magpie. A Townsend's warbler couple fretted about whether the eagle would return. Black-capped chickadees warned of a large troop of hollows clustered around a shop called Scarecrow Video. Hollows are what most fauna have long called mofos, named for their dissociative state. In the natural world, mofos are mistaken for milky-eyed machines intent on destruction, empty vessels that have lost their inner intelligence, the walking blind, dumb animals. What utter blasphemy! A pie in the face of the species that invented a magic box that can nuke a hot pocket in seconds. Pigeons bickered about personal space. A red-breasted nuthatch sang a song about digestive health, chuckling to himself between breaths. There was excited twitter about the one who opens doors. And then, through Aura, I heard the greatest news of the century. The description came as news of distant explosions fighting one another, bang against bang, described as a war of bombs, and then my veins flooded with adrenaline because I knew there was only one species who mastered the art of obliterating things, of puppeteering weapons to do their bidding, the bureaucratic art of war. Mofos. I knew it. Healthy ones that could drive a tank and release a nuke. Somewhere they were out there fighting back, gaining ground, and reclaiming their territory, which meant that somewhere, someone in a lab coat was working on a cure. My heart soared. I listened more, puffed with happiness. I could hear crows calling to one another, sharing information about caches, and spreading valuable intel about food stops. I listened for as long as I could handle, waiting for specifics about the heroic survivor mofos. But the pressing topic never returned, and it was exhausting getting it bombarded with a constant but-splosion of information. I told Dennis to sit under the shade of a newly budding Japanese cherry tree, launching into the air for more recon. I perched on the moss-green roof of the University Public Library. Smoke rose in black coils from the horizon far in the distance, too far to be of immediate concern. I had a clear view of the library's surrounding area. Eye to eye with the tree line, I peered down at parking lots and a patchwork of slate gray rooftops. Not far away, the spire of the Blessed Sacrament Church caught the sun with its glacial green. I cleared my throat, stomach suddenly twisting into pretzel shapes. I spread my wings, opened my beak, and fluttered my gular. This sounds ruder than it is. It's actually just me flapping my neck muscles to stay cool. The burnt matchsticks that are my legs started to shake. Yep, I was a fellow with stage fright. But Dennis and I had plans, and I needed information desperately. So I took in a deep breath, ruffled my plumage, and called out to a world I've never been part of, the natural world. Can someone tell me how to find Oneida? Please, I'm looking for Oneida, the one searched for. Silence. I waited a minute and then decided to try again, calling out louder, with a sprinkle more bravado, a touch more bass in my tone. The silence became eerie. The symphony of aura ceased. A gust of wind blew through the tree crowns, rustling the branches of the cherry trees. The trees whispered the words of a sharp-edged warning. Beware, beware. I wish they were more specific. I looked down to check on Dennis, who was lying under the tree, sniffing at the sky. Something did feel off. I felt like there were eyes on me. Not literally, like when I cashed Big Jim's eyeball, but like someone or something was watching me in the shadows. I tried one more time to get my post into aura, donning a bit of an accent this time, a little soap opera flair to my delivery. Please! It's a matter of life and death. I must unearth Oneida. There was no response. More breathless silence. Just then, an Anna's hummingbird darted past me, a bullet in mother of pearl who shrieked, Cheese cups! Ass clubs! Keep away! Hummingbirds have a reputation for being curt and vague, but I began to wonder if this one had been at some fermented fruit. Turns out I didn't have to wait long to decipher her warning. The big black doors at the top of the stone steps to the building of books swung open. Under the arches of the great white structure, under ivory pillars and large green letters bearing the library's name, loomed an enormous mass. It let out a deep huff, a low grumble that made the earth tremor. It squinted to orient itself in the bright sunlight. Ruff, ruff. A fucking grizzly. My eyes locked in on the Japanese cherry tree, below it to Dennis, now standing on 4 paws, body posture tense and erect, and facing the great tawny mass that had emerged from the library. Cheese and shit niblets, Dennis, don't make a fucking sound. On cue, Dennis let out a burst of booming barks that seemed to say, Fuck off, you douche flute, which is exactly what a grizzly the size of a jumbo vending machine likes to hear after rousing from a nap. The bear spun toward Dennis. Even from this distance, I could see a ripple streak through the copper tips of its fur. It rose to its hind legs and started huffing. The silence clouded with guttural growls. Dennis responded by barking louder, faster, spinning on his axis. The bear moaned a long, pointed accusation, huffed harder, stopped to sniff the air. Then it flattened its ears to its head and expelled a roar that tore through the bones of the building and ran up my spine. Long, mustard-brown fangs were all I needed to see. The bear coughed out more woofs, panting frustration. It slapped the stone ground with its club-like paws, which was grizzly language I understood. It was going to kill Dennis. The bear reared back and charged at Dennis full tilt. I cried out to him. The mass of muscle and brown stopped just before reaching Dennis's front paws, lifting its head high into the air, lowering it to train its eyes on him. It lunged at him with open mouth and mammoth paws in flight, great black nose twitching. Dennis barked, darting from side to side to avoid the swipes, saliva frothing on his jowls. The bear began to circle Dennis, backing him up against the Japanese cherry tree. I didn't have much time. Think, ST, think. I dropped from the library roof, conserving my energy by hijacking a ride on a puff of air. Beak first, I made a beeline for the grizzly's head. As I neared, I filled with smell, the smell of clothes, wet grass, raw liver, putrid carcass. Then, right as I neared Dennis's tail, the bear threw its weight into a paw swipe. The blow smashed Dennis across the ribs, sending him rolling across the library lawn. He yelped, a string of tight squeals that I heard in my heart. Dennis. I slipped past the bear's right ear, maneuvered a tight mid-air flip turn, and drove my beak into the bear's backside. The bear lifted its teeth skyward and bellowed at the sun. Pivoting on hind legs, it lunged at me, fang first, missing my wing by an inch. I rose above the bear, snatching its ear in my foot and yanking hard. The bear whipped its paw up, driving a force of air that thrust me sideways. I recovered, lifting to safety. Still on hind legs, the grizzly woofed and huffed at me, rage igniting amber in its eyes. I stole a glance at Dennis. He was back on all paws, shaking off the hit, steadying, and no doubt preparing to put himself back into the jaws of an adult bear. I was too focused on Dennis. The bear smashed me midair, giant club of a paw punching me through space and time and into the trunk of a Japanese cherry tree. I hit the tree with thwack and toppled to the dirt, completely winded. A sharp pain streaked up my beak. Fluttering my gular, I righted myself at the tree base to see the bear lumbering toward Dennis. My eyes darted. Come on, ST, do something. Snapping up a huge silvery rock the size of a whole German boob in my feet, I soared high, high up into the air, wings burning from the sun and sting, and I released that fucking boob rock like a World War II B-24 dropping its load. The rock struck the grizzly's skull with a dull clunk. I might as well have kicked it in the nuts. The bear got very, very angry. It lunged at me from below, roaring from its pancreas, arms swinging, mustard fangs snapping at my back. I fluttered above it for a few seconds, air dodging the blows, my wing burning with a staggering ache. I counted 1, 2, 3, then whisked over the bear's head and shot right over Dennis. Zzz, Dennis, here, boy, I screeched. I heard Dennis's frantic panting under my tail feathers as I dove over the library lawn, my shadow a phantom below. Crow chased by bloodhound, chased by grizzly bear, across the university public library entrance lawn, and across the street, and then tearing across the stretch of green that's the university playground. Never in my life have I ever been happy to see a Honda Civic, but today was a day of firsts, and I dove beneath its undercarriage, below its royal blue body, whistling for Dennis. Dennis skidded into the Civic's passenger door, then stuffed his wrinkled mass under the car with me, where we waited for an enraged apex predator to exact its revenge. In an instant, the air was filled with calls. Screams, threats, warnings made a deafeningly horrid symphony. I peeked out from behind a rear tire to see the sky inky with bodies, all of them hovering above the air, flapping and cawing and pelting rocks and bottle caps and shoes and Gatorade and condoms at the stunned bear. The bear snarled and swiped, but quickly realized it was outnumbered as the crows intensified their attack, caws getting louder and louder. Suddenly the bear lowered its head, shook its fur, and cantered back toward the black library doors, a sky full of black demons driving it on. Enough! Screamed someone with the voice of God, or James Earl Jones. And the crows stopped. Quiet trapped us in its net. You could have heard a mouse fart. They retreated, disappearing into the trees. I looked over at Dennis, who was licking his side vigorously. A flap of skin hung down from his ribs where the grizzly had clobbered him. I inched out from under the Honda and lifted myself high enough into the air to see the grizzly back at the library doors. Flashbacks from the Discovery Channel haunted me, stirring up the Latin name for the grizzly bear. Ursus arctos horribilis. Horribilis indeed. As the bear paced and then started to lumber away from the library, 3 brown blobs emerged from the doors to shadow her. Cubs. Great, she reproduced. There are more of those fuzzy death potatoes out in society helping themselves to public facilities that are funded by our hard-earned tax dollars. My mind belatedly translated the hummingbird's cry of cheese cups, ass clubs, keep away, to the more plausible she's up, has cubs, keep away. I'll admit I had been a bit quick to judge her sobriety. I lowered to terra firma and watched Dennis licking and whining at the angry gash in his side. Puttering along the curb where the Honda was parked, I located a brightly colored flyer for the High Times U.S. Cannabis Cup in Seattle, Washington. Snatching it in my beak, I hopped back to the Civic and whistled, summoning Dennis to inch himself from the car's comatose body. I plodded toward him and gingerly pressed the High Times flyer to his side. He snapped instinctually, and I sprang backwards. Easy, Dennis, easy, boy, I said, mimicking Big Jim every time he loaded Dennis into the bathtub as I hopped onto the sink to avoid a tidal wave of water. Big Jim was always too busy wrestling the hound and camouflaging the bathroom in soap suds to listen to me explain Dennis's predicament. It wasn't the bath Dennis was afraid of, it was the plug hole. He was afraid he would get sucked down into the dark and we wouldn't find him. Dennis was onto something. I once cached a house key down there and it was never seen again. Dennis let out a tight growl. Good boy, Dennis. It's okay. I got you, I whispered. Shuffling toward him, pain was licking up my wing in electric streaks, and my injury wasn't half as bad as Dennis's. Other than a sharp whine, he didn't protest anymore, seeming to trust me, to accept my medical assistance. The prismatic cannabis cup flyer stuck fast to his wet wound. Brother Blackwing, came the imposing voice. I grimaced. Both titles bothered me. I don't fully identify as a crow, finding the label to be overly simplistic, and I was not his brother. A constellation of black, shining eyes tracked me from the big leaf maples above. College crows. Dennis seemed too distracted by his pain to care. The maples themselves watched silently, gently breathing in some of the attention. Trees are known peacekeepers, though not very good with secrets. I kept quiet, unsure of what to say, or whether I wanted to say anything at all. Dennis and I were outnumbered, weak, and exposed. I waited, resisting the temptation to ghoul or flutter, so as not to give away my emotional state. Blackwing, the voice continued, this time like a chiming of cathedral bells as a large black corvid dropped from the sun and onto a low maple arm. I cocked my head at him, hopping onto one foot. He craned forward, the brilliant blue of his sheen lulling me into a false sense of comfort. You might think we all look alike, but again, it just takes a bit of focus, attention, consciousness. Mofos tend to be too locked in the beautiful basements of their minds to notice certain subtleties. Sorry, I said I'd be honest. No, this wasn't your run-of-the-mill trash raider. This was a bold and charismatic presence with a perfectly polished charcoal beak. I saw his game. This sneakster was out to disarm me with charm. Are you all right, Brother Blackwing? We are fine, and I'm not your brother, I answered. The beautiful crow bobbed his head, a submissive offering. We see that you have command over the dog. Ah, there it is, I thought, an angle. Big Jim says there's always an agenda. That's why you've got to batten down the hatches, fight for what's yours, and look out for numero uno. That's why you don't let anyone in. Big Jim's philosophy sound and clear as Windexed glass. Everyone wants to steal your Cheetos. I refused to answer the crow, keeping burning questions about what had happened to the mofos in my plumage. I would seek answers from a trustworthy source. He's hurt, said the annoyingly flawless fancy of feathers, whose wings looked like something out of a Da Vinci's sketchbook. Here. Another crow, smaller, with a burn patch on the underside of her right wing and singed contour feathers, dropped from above. She released a petite bushel of herbs at my feet. The boss crow gestured. Yarrow, for the dog. It will help with healing. Dennis didn't like me approaching the cannabis cup flyer, his hide erupting in a number of flinches, but he allowed me to peel it from the wet red and press the yarrow against his wound with my feet as the crow crowd looked on in awe. A sense of importance warmed my throat like Woodinville whiskey. The Prince of Perfect started up again. You need to be careful out there. We don't need your help, I spat, surprised by my venom. You are the one who called for help on Aura, said the crow, his legions gently chirping in agreement. We didn't know you knew about Aura or the ways of the Black Wings. We've watched you for some time now. Yeah, watched, harassed, threatened. Nice job, guys, I said, adding more of the stalks and miniature white flowers of the yarrow to Dennis's red, red hole. Listen, I thank you for chasing off the grizzly, truly, but Dennis and I are doing just fine by ourselves. Maine Crow fluttered his wings, his head darting from side to side, displaying his displeasure to the black bodies around him. I will apologize for any misgivings. I am sorry to hear of them. Perhaps I can help you. I need to find Oneida. Oneida. Suddenly the crows were statues as the wind exhaled through the maple tree, its leaves dancing like a 1920s flapper. Oneida, it whispered, the one searched for. The crows waited, monuments of reverence, for the secrets to take the wings of the wind. Oneida. How do you know of Oneida? Asked the crow chief, his membrane licking his eye. Oneida, came a crow's voice from a collage of emerald leaves, the one who moves between worlds. The one of many names, the one of the stars, cried another. The sayer of truth, the master of escape, Oneida, the one of many minds. How do you know of Oneida? The beautiful crow asked again. Oneida can only be found if Oneida wants to be. Oneida is everywhere and nowhere and knows tomorrow's sun. If Oneida calls, you are summoned like a tide by the moon. I would never tell them that I might have accidentally tuned in to their unavoidably noisy ass aura a couple times in the past, or I might have heard about the one searched for, this so-called prophet, by mistake. I would never tell them that I was so desperate and in need of answers that I'd do anything, even follow the directive whisperings of Aura to help my Big Jim. Respectfully, that's not your business. And I definitely wouldn't tell those ass trumpets. I bobbed my head at Bonnie and Clyde, two regular harassers. He gave them both a dark stare. I see. Well, if you'd be willing, I don't think they'd be willing to associate with a hybrid like me. But you are a hybrid, aren't you? A hybrid Blackwing, enslaved by the mofos, caged and clipped. Clipped? My wings work perfectly, probably better than yours. We aren't judging you, Blackwing. We say how it is. My name is Cry. This is my best attempt to phonetically translate his name for you. Look, Cry, don't call me hybrid or Blackwing. My name is Shitturd, and I am what I am. Just tell me where I can find Oneida, please, and we'll be on our way. Since you are a hybrid Blackwing, you walk the way of the hollows. You live trapped in a... Enough, I squawked, mimicking his earlier cry. You don't know who I am. None of you fuckers do. This caused a frenzy among the crows, a bluster of throaty keening. I reeled, backing up and bracing myself. Dennis sprang to his feet, racing to the trunk of the tree and unleashing his warnings at the maple full of life. I'd only ever seen the dreaded UPS trucks inflame him in this manner. I beamed, my breast feathers puffing to inflate me. I had my own protector, my own murder. Cry silenced his brethren with one slash of his beak cutting through the air. He took his time with a slow nod, and then he gave me directions. I'm afraid I'm not able to precisely translate these for you. I don't mean to sound patronizing, but if you haven't been airborne, you have no context and the translation is complicated. I will try to simplify it for you. Basically, the sky is a bird's nature, home, and an extension of the soul. They know it and remember it better than earthly destinations. Feathered ones, except penguins and turkeys because they're fucking morons, have wonderful memories. Not sure why elephants get all the damn credit. They travel by tips heard through aura, sort of like GPS, and by their relationship to the sun and stars who engage them in sensory conversation. All this forms what we call a mind map. Conversations with no words are understandably very difficult to explain to mofos, but they are happening all the time, all around. The hardest part to explain is the Earth's magnetic field, which can always be heard, much like aura. Think of it as the strings of a McPherson Camriel 4.0 acoustic guitar in your heart, the strumming of which gives you insight and instruction. All flora and fauna listen to the Earth's magnetism. It is how the sand, soil, clay, and dust communicate, how every element of our infinite universe and shared home talks to us, sometimes guiding us through our journey. I guess the closest mofo comparison is how your gods speak to some of you, or the emergency broadcast system. We perceive ultraviolet light and wavelengths of color that allow us to see sexual dichromatism, which is how I could tell, aside from looking up her skirt, that the petite crow with the burn patch under her right wing was a girl. UV light paints a kaleidoscope of patterns and signals that mofos appear to be blind to, a literal blindness, different from the commonplace numbed blindness of closing off the mind. I think it would just be fucking rude of me to harp on about what beauty and insight you're missing out on there. So, mind maps. I guess I could tap into all this majestic shit more often, but I'll be honest, I use landmarks like Starbucks, the Space Needle, and McDonald's. Way more practical and iconic. Cry and the college Blackwings watched us leave. A pair of cabbage white butterflies danced around me, pirouetting in the sunshine. Butterflies live short lives because they have mastered the art of living. They serve to pass it on with luminous bursts of joy, bright flickers from the other side. I listened to their bell-like beckoning. Oneida calls you! Oneida calls you! They uttered, breathless with excitement. The paper-winged ones are truth-tellers, postage stamp-sized messengers who paint the air into a watercolor of magic and taste with their feet. We are best advised not to blast them with Roundup. Knowing I had a fairly decent audience at this point, I decided to ham up my exit by sitting on Dennis's back while holding his leash with my foot, riding him like a stallion into the Wild West. I could hear chirps and incredulous murmurs all around. I was pretty freaking awesome. Well, it would have been had I not been more scared than a KFC-bound chicken. There was a corn nut of truth in what Cry said. I was, after all, clipped. A crow who'd never really left his own nest. And Oneida was far from home. And the West was wilder than I could have possibly imagined. That was a long one. See you next time for Chapter 7.